There is a meeting you remember more clearly than any other meeting of your career. You can probably picture the door right now, the exact corner of the office it was in, which way the chair faced, where the file was, what time of day it was. You can probably even remember the temperature of the room. You walked into that cabin certain of one thing. You were going to be defended. Something had happened to you that was wrong, and you had the evidence, and the person in that chair could fix it. You had rehearsed this conversation for 2 days. You had even practiced the calm voice you would use, so it would not sound like you were complaining. And then you walked out 40 minutes later, and something in you had quietly broken. He had not shouted. He had not been cruel. He had nodded. He had said the right phrases. He had even, at one point, agreed with you in private. And then nothing happened. The injustice stood. The person who did it kept doing it. And you went home that night carrying the strangest, most disorienting feeling a corporate professional can ever carry, not anger, not even sadness. Confusion. A specific kind of confusion you have never quite found the word for in any language. Here is what nobody has ever told you about that meeting. It was not confusing. It was perfectly clean. You simply had no way to read it. You walked in asking the wrong question, and you walked out with no answer because the question had no answer to give. Tonight, you are going to read that meeting correctly for the first time. And once you do, you will never sit on the wrong side of a manager's desk in the same way again. You have spent years trying to work out whether your manager is on your side. That is the wrong question. He is not on your side. He is not against you. He is on his own side. And his side and yours overlap only sometimes, and only by accident. The day you stop asking, "Is my manager with me?" and start asking, "Where do his interests and mine happen to point the same way?" is the day you stop being managed and start navigating. This is not cynicism. It is one of the most carefully documented findings in the sociology of corporate life. The sociologist Robert Jackal spent years embedded inside large corporate bureaucracies, watching managers up close. His conclusion was cold and exact. A manager is not rated by the people who decide his career on whether he was fair to the people under him. He is rated on whether the team produced visible results and stayed quiet. The fairness question never appears on the form. The noise question always does. And the moment you understand that, your manager's behavior becomes legible. A team with visible internal conflict signals a manager who cannot manage. So his incentive is not to resolve the conflict. His incentive is to suppress it, to make it go away, to keep the floor quiet. And the person making the noise, the one with the legitimate complaint, is, from his career's point of view, the disturbance, not the original injustice, the complaint about it. Now add a second layer to this, because alone it is not enough to explain what you saw on his face. The anthropologist Robin Dunbar showed that the human brain can carry stable, meaningful tracking of roughly 150 people. That is the ceiling. Beyond it, the mind starts to lose detail. Your manager, in a department of 1,000, simply cannot track who did what at the level you imagine he can. So he runs on heuristics, fast, ancient shortcuts. Visibility, volume, who he hears from, who he sees, who is standing near the win. Which means when the person who wronged you keeps quietly producing visible work in the corridor outside his cabin, and you sit on the other side of his desk asking him to take a careful, time-consuming, politically expensive look at an old episode. His brain, before he has formed a single conscious thought, has already taken a position. Not against you, just away from the cost. And there is one more layer, and this is the layer that explains the eyes. The evolutionary psychologist William von Hippel describes how the human mind protects itself from internal discomfort. We do not handle the thought that we are failing at our role well. So we quietly, sincerely, persuade ourselves that the unfair outcome was actually fair. We are not lying to you when we do this. We have first lied to ourselves. By the time your manager sat across from you that day, he had already convinced himself, genuinely, in some part of his mind he is not even aware of, that the truth was somewhere in the middle. That you were also at fault. That this was a perspective issue. He was not a coward in that chair. He was a man who had already done the persuading required to keep liking himself. 3 layers. The career incentive that punishes him for protecting you. The cognitive ceiling that makes the harvester look more real to him than you do. And the self-deception that lets him sleep at night. Together they form one single, ancient piece of behavior. And to see what it actually is, you have to look past the office building entirely. Step out of the office. Walk 1.5 million years backward. You are looking at a primate troop. A dominant coalition at the top. A vulnerable cluster at the bottom. And in between, the figure who actually does most of the work of holding the troop together, the mid-ranking male. This is the animal your manager descends from. Not the alpha. The middle. Robert Sapolsky spent over 20 years studying baboons in the wild. His most counterintuitive finding has nothing to do with the top. It has to do with the middle. Sapolsky discovered that the middle of the hierarchy is where stress chemistry concentrates. The mid-ranker absorbs pressure from above and threats from below at the same time. His cortisol is permanently elevated. His behavior shows the most appeasement toward those above him. He has, in real biological terms, the least available capacity in the troop for adjudicating fairness, which is the precise condition your manager arrived in his cabin in the morning of your meeting. And here is the second finding, from the primatologist Frans de Waal, who spent decades watching the political life of chimpanzees and other primates. De Waal's central insight is that, in a primate troop, the survival of a mid-ranking male depends entirely on his standing with the dominant coalition above him. Alliances run vertically. Power is held by the top group. A mid-ranker who challenges the dominant coalition to protect a low-ranker gains nothing and risks everything. His position, his protection, sometimes his life. So evolution wrote a piece of code into every mid-ranking primate. Invest upward. Be loyal upward. If a conflict ever arises between someone above you and someone below you, defer upward and sacrifice downward. The mid-ranker who consistently ran that code lived. The mid-ranker who tried the opposite did not. Your manager is running that code right now. He is not a bad person. He is a 1.5 million-year-old piece of survival software, sitting in a chair, wearing a lanyard. The cabin is new. The behavior is not. And every primatologist who has watched this play out across thousands of hours of field observation will tell you the same thing. The mid-ranker is not deciding, in the moment, whether to defend the subordinate. He decided that 90,000 generations ago. The conversation in the cabin is just the part of it you got to see. Now go back inside the meeting. With everything you now know. You walk in. You sit down. You begin calmly, the way you rehearsed. In the half-second before you finish your first sentence, 3 things have already happened in the man across from you. He has registered, somewhere below his awareness, that what you are bringing him is a noise complaint about someone whose visible presence in this floor is more valuable to his rating than yours. His brain has fallen back on the heuristic that the visible contributor is the real contributor. And the part of him that does not want to feel like a coward has already begun, very quietly, the work of persuading him that the truth here is more complicated than you are presenting it. None of this is malicious. None of it is even conscious. It is finished before you have completed your second sentence. So while you describe the injustice, with the careful tone and the documentation and the dates, he is running an entirely different script underneath. His loyalty is already pointed up the room and out the door, toward the manager above him who signs his rating, and toward the harvester whose visibility is part of his floor's quiet performance. You are below the line of his loyalty. The conversation was decided before you took your seat. Then he nods. He agrees with parts of what you say. He acknowledges the difficulty. He even at one point says the line you will replay for weeks, "You are right, this should not have happened." And then nothing happens. Because the agreement in his voice and the inaction in his calendar are not in conflict. They are the same transaction. The agreement keeps you from escalating tonight. The inaction keeps the noise from reaching the floor above him. Both serve his upward loyalty. Both protect his rating. The conversation has done its job. He has spent nothing he could not afford to spend, and you have spent 40 minutes of your life and the last reserves of a kind of trust you cannot quite name as you walk back to your desk. This was not a betrayal. A betrayal would require him to have been on your side first. He never was. The conversation completed a transaction whose terms you were never shown. And there is a name for the transaction. So let us name what you actually saw on his face that day. The upward incentive, the cognitive ceiling, the self-persuasion, the 1.5 million year old vertical coalition code. All of it together, running through a single mid-ranking primate in business formal. The loyalty gradient, the structural direction in which loyalty flows inside any hierarchy. Upward toward the source of survival, never downward, where survival cannot be offered in return. Visible only to a person who has stepped back from inside the hierarchy long enough to see its shape. Sit with the word gradient because it is exact. Loyalty in an office is not a feeling. It is a slope. Like water on a hillside, like heat in a room, it moves in one direction because the physics of the building decides where it goes. Your manager did not choose the direction of his loyalty. The architecture above him did. He simply lives on the slope. And notice what this word costs you and gives you in the same breath. It costs you the version of the story in which your manager was supposed to be your protector and failed. He was never that. He could not have been that. The gradient does not allow it. But what it gives you in return is much larger. It gives you the only frame inside which his behavior ever made sense, the frame in which it stops being personal and starts being structural. You were never being neglected by one inadequate man. You were watching the laws of gravity inside a hierarchy. And nobody feels betrayed by gravity. You feel foolish if you keep expecting things to fall up. You feel capable the moment you account for the slope. You have just accounted for the slope. Here is what almost no one ever tells you about reading the loyalty gradient correctly. The moment you see it, 4 things change at once, and each of them gives you back something the system has quietly been spending without your permission. The first thing you get back is your nights. Most of the pain of a manager who did not defend you is not the original injustice. It is the 11 p.m. replay. The silent argument with an empty cabin. The hope you keep refloating that next time he will be different. All of that runs on one assumption, that he is the variable. That if you could only find the right words, the right evidence, the right tone, the result would change. The loyalty gradient says, he is not the variable. The slope is the variable. He is the water. And once you understand that, the 11 p.m. replay simply stops. There is nothing left to rehearse. The river was always going to go where the riverbed sent it. The second thing you get back is your loyalty. You have been pouring loyalty into a relationship that was never structurally capable of returning it. You are not foolish to do that. Most people do it for decades. But knowing what you now know, you can redirect that loyalty not toward a peer who claims it, not toward the company that markets for it, toward the small set of relationships and skills that actually do reciprocate. Loyalty is a finite, expensive substance. You have been spending it uphill. You can now spend it sideways and inward. The third thing you get back is your strategy. Once you understand that the building reads visibility and upward signal, you stop pouring all of your work into the invisible layer in the hope that someone will eventually notice the depth of it. You build deliberately one clear, honest signal that points upward, alongside the real work. This is not politics. This is not performance. This is reading the instrument and answering it. The harvester reads the instrument cynically. You can read it cleanly. The instrument does not care which one of you is doing it. It only knows whether you are doing it at all. And the fourth thing you get back is the largest, and most people in your office will never reach it. You can see the whole board. You can now see, in every cabin in this building, the same gradient running. Your manager has a manager. That manager's loyalty is running up to someone you have never met. That person's loyalty is running up to a coalition above her, and that coalition's loyalty is running up to a board that has its own gradient. The bargain you discovered in your manager's cabin is happening at every single tier of this building simultaneously. The same mid-ranking primate with a different lanyard in a different room. You stop being a piece on the board, complaining about a move. You become a reader of the board, watching the game. Most professionals will work an entire career and never see the gradient. They will spend 40 years believing their manager either loved them or failed them, and they will retire telling their grandchildren the same private story about one specific person who did not have their back. That is the large group. That is the overwhelming majority of people who have ever worked in a building like the one you sit in. You are not in that group anymore. As of tonight, you are in a much smaller one, the people who understand that the manager was never the variable. The bargain was. And a person who can see the bargain can finally decide, deliberately, what they will trade inside it and what they will not. That decision was always yours to make. You just could not see the table you were sitting at. You can see the table now. Welcome to the smaller group. Next time, you now understand why the bargain protects the manager. But there is one moment in a career when the bargain turns its attention to you. When the system decides quietly that it would like you gone but cannot afford to say so out loud. It has a name. 3 letters. You have watched it happen to someone. You may have already felt its first temperature change in your own week. It is the most carefully engineered exit a corporation has ever designed. That episode is next.